Mike, I might actually start with you, because just on your last point there, it struck me as really, really interesting, the ethics of where we spend our money, and also this idea that you can get more bang for your buck if you use creative properly, as opposed to going down the route of AI. And it just occurred to me, I wonder, is that a lesson, do you think, that advertisers and companies are going to need to learn the hard way? Do you think that the temptation of going down the AI route, not having the junior staff cutting corners where they can, and I might come to you, Lolly, because I can see you're nodding, do you think the temptation of that is going to be too great because you can save the money, and you have to learn the hard way that actually that's not what's going to give you the bang for your buck?
I hope we don't have to learn the hard way, because the learning loop, the OODA loop there, is going to be very long term. If you'd have to destroy an entire industry to show that the industry was worth having, it's going to be. I think what I hope is that we can learn from history. One of the great things about humans is we do write things down, and we have been things before, and it'd be a sad state of affairs if we couldn't learn from other people's mistakes. We have sort of done this already. We have been eviscerating the ad industry via social media already. And if you look at the studies about the declining effectiveness of advertising, which is only, who cares about advertising, we're talking about society, but advertising is getting less and less effective as more and more money piles into social media. I don't think the two things are perfectly correlated, but they are pretty much. I think we could perhaps learn the lessons for the last 5 years, 10 years of that, to make the case now. The second thing I'd do is, why don't we set up some tests? Rather than destroying an industry, why don't we just do A/B tests in a way that Richard, I'm sure, will educate us how to do it, to work out, well, what is the saving? What is the value here? If your ads are 15% less effective, but cost 95% less, is that a bargain? Who knows? I think we don't have to wait to destroy everything to find out, or at least I hope we don't.
Yeah, and what do you think of that, Lolly, and just generally, how do you protect creativity from being devalued before it's too late? Because this is moving so fast, isn't it? That's the problem. I know Mike is talking about tests, but the question is, by the time you get all the research back, how much damage will be done? You can research quickly. Go on, yes.
I don't think we can have it both ways. I don't think we can be in the boardroom to say, oh, this is great, look at all the profits we have now and we've laid off X amount of staff, but oh no, there's no jobs for my kids. It's all related, right? So, at the end of the day also, when we look at creativity, we have to think about creativity as an origin. That AI doesn't have origin, it's joining data points, it's joining the thing that it thinks is the most acceptable answer. It can't have no answer, so that's where the hallucinations come from, it'll make up an answer. The origin of the story, if you've got two paintings, one by an artist that suffered heartbreak and did this beautiful painting and then AI recreates it, which one has value? The one with the origin, the friction, the human friction piece. So just because we can doesn't mean that we should. And I think we don't have any pause points built in at any point in our lives to be able to say, what are the longer term consequences of this? Not just 2025 to 35, and we keep doing these sort of 10-year increments where we say this is what we're looking at. 2050 and beyond. What are the consequences of what we're doing in terms of we're making more money now in the short term, but those longer term consequences of what that will mean for us in terms of connectedness, human flourishing, and actually isn't the point that we all have purpose. Because without that, I'm very worried for us.
Richard, what does behavioural science tell us then in order to get the most out of AI? What sort of lessons can we learn?
So there's quite a few studies already on that kind of topic. There's an amazing one from 2023 by Kobe Millet, who's at VR University in Amsterdam. And what he does is get various different objects, like a poster or other things, and he shows them to people and asks them to rate the artistic merit, the creativity, and their purchase intent. And the twist in the experiment is sometimes he labels it as hand-drawn, sometimes created by AI. And what he finds again and again across the three metrics is exactly the same object is rated lower if people think it's AI generated.
Right.
And when it comes to purchase intent, there's a 61% variance from that particular study. Now, his argument is there's a long-standing idea in behavioural science called the labour illusion, or the illusion of effort, which is essentially if you show people the amount of efforts you've gone to create a product, they tend to rate it higher. It's exactly the same food or pair of trainers or mobile phone or vacuum. If you think lots of effort's gone into it, you rate it higher. And Millet's argument is our general experience with Claude or ChatGPT is it spits out a blog post or a poem or whatever you want in seconds. So we've started to assume AI generated equals low effort, and low effort in our minds equals poor quality. Now that's something I think every agency or brand has to think about. Because let's say you work at a creative agency or a media agency, and you used to take a week to produce a competitive review. If you can objectively create the same quality in a day, don't expect your client to be willing to pay as much now that it's AI powered or appreciate it as much. So what we need to do, like Mike says, is learn from history. Like there's been all sorts of occasions where people have got round this problem of the illusion of effort. So there's a really famous story from late 90s when Citigroup merged. So these were two giant banks, Travelers and Citibank. They come together in 1998, and they decide they want a new logo. They hire the world's best designer because they're flush with cash. They hire Paula Scher to create them a new logo. And as she's being briefed, you can see all these pictures online, she's drinking a cup of coffee. She takes her cup of coffee up and she starts sketching out a logo. And if you look online, look at her napkin, and then look at the Citigroup logo, and it is essentially the same. So she goes back 3 months later with the team. She presents Citigroup with a $1.5 million bill. And the client supposedly is absolutely aghast and says, like, you can't in all good faith charge us this. It took you 30 seconds. And her legendary answer is, yes, it took me 30 seconds, but it took me 34 years to learn how to do it in 30 seconds. So what she's doing and what we can learn from, this is the point. If you are speeding up your processes with AI, recognise people will judge that product as worse, even if it isn't. And therefore, you need to draw attention to the amount of expertise, the amount of time that went into setting up those processes and protocols. So you're absolutely right. Unless you take counterbalancing measures, churning out stuff from AI, even if it's the same quality, and we can argue whether it will be judged as worse.
That's so interesting. I want to ask you, Lolly, maybe if you could pick up on something that Mike was talking about again, the local content and how well that's doing, but also because the creative aspect inherent in it. And also, I suppose, the authenticity of it, and people can form that connection. And obviously, Gen Z in particular are looking for this authenticity. So how do you think brands and employers should try to adapt to that?
I think it's plugging into what our deepest needs are at the moment, which is not only a return to the past in terms of the way that we lived in the past seemed better. And so we're getting a lot of feeling about this, but also not just the romanticism of that part, but the fact that we used to shop maybe in a market, or we would spend, time talking to the butcher, or we would have individual shops, and sort of the homogenization of things has not worked for us. The dislocation has not worked for us. And actually, what we're seeing in things like the 15-minute city build and ideas like that are about how do we connect us into a way that we shop and experience the world, and we live in a world where we're living in the cities more connected, but more like little villages. And so it's that piece. It's like, how do I belong? So the question behind it, and sure, we would be grappling this even in UCD. What does it mean to belong to UCD? When you're online, when you're virtual, when you're in different countries. So it's the alignment for Gen Z between not just the core values and your actions, but actually this deeper level meaning of organizational culture. And traditionally, we have not been great at that alignment. We have a lot of washing stuff, gender washing, greenwashing, et cetera, about the way that we are. And this level of authenticity, they're coming in almost forensically, looking at organizations now to say, well, let me talk to people that have worked for you. Let me not just look at Glassdoor, but let me actually have a look at your impact points. Where do you think you're going to go? How do you feel about AI? That's a big question at the moment for Gen Z about with the decisions that they're making about companies. So yes, we can replace people with AI, but also do we not have cultures that we engender that we should be building? So there's a big pushback at the moment, and some companies are saying we're going to be very transparent about our use of AI, exactly like you say, sort of where is it and how is it, and that's falling very well for Gen Z. So this kind of more ethical use of it that's coming from them, which gives me huge hope.
Okay. Mike, I'll come to you then on the attention journey and the phones, and actually it's something that we talk about all the time on radio now, just trying to keep people's attention, at any point. If you want to move from theory to practice on this, how would you advise Irish advertisers to start on the attention journey?
Well, I think first thing is to learn from history, which is you guys are sitting on lots and lots of data about your previous campaigns. How much money you spent on TV, and how much on radio, and how much on Facebook, and Insta, and whatever. We can ingest that data and then sort of spit back an answer saying, we think you're getting most of your attention here or there. And just knowing, the truth will set you free in that sense there. So just the very first thing is to apply some of the learnings that Richard's been talking about, some of the algorithms and models that we've got to your existing data, because that will be eye-opening there. The second thing to do, I think, once you've worked out how much the attention is costing you and how it all interacts together, is to set up experiments. The advantage of the digital world and the advantage of a geo-targeted media like radio is that you can run some ads in some areas and others in others. You can do A/B tests. Similarly, you can choose to spend more money here or there and observe the results so that you can actually learn something in this sort of small-scale experimental way. And always trying to make sure that when you run these experiments, which they don't have to be very sophisticated things, but always link it to the outcome that you're interested in. So that you can say that in the business of advertising, we sell or else. It might be the show end of business, but it's still business. So we have an outcome metric, which is sales or memory. Use that. Use that as your dependent variable for your experiment. So that's how I do it. I'd look at the past, and then I would start setting up some experiments and learn along the way. And, it's what we do anyway, but we can just do it more systematically.
Can I ask you finally, Richard, when you're talking about mood and ads and radio and how people might be more susceptible to taking in a message if they're in a good mood, does that mean that really annoying ads don't work?
Not necessarily.
No, they work.
They work. Because I can off the top of my head think of a couple that really annoy me, but I can think of them.
Yeah. So there's a brilliant behavioural scientist and author called Rory Sutherland, and he says in physics, like the opposite of a good idea is a bad idea. In psychology, the opposite of a good idea can be another good idea.
Okay.
And I think what he means by that is, think about like an everyday situation. You want to drive from Dublin to Belfast. Well, you don't have to follow one specific route. There are many different ways of getting there. And persuasion is exactly the same. I think there are lots of different ways to solve a similar problem. But what I would argue, and that Kantar data that I referenced hopefully supports it, is the use of humour is something that is criminally underrated. And we have seen advertisers make this long-term move away from it, despite evidence that if you put someone in a good mood, they notice, they believe, they think things are cheaper and they like the ads more. So it's not that there are no other tactics of doing that. And your example of things like, Go Compare, very kind of annoying, repetitive ads, they can certainly, through repetition and the use of a concrete, visualisable figure, they can generate memory. But there is a trade-off for them. And that loss of likability has a financial cost. So maybe they get memory, but they lose likability. And the reason I say it has a financial cost is there's a series of studies into an idea called the halo effect. So early studies in the 1930s, they've been repeated ever since then over the next 90 years. And the halo effect is the idea that if someone has one standout characteristic, It could be that they're really beautiful. It could be that they're really funny. It could be that they're really intelligent. What people tend to do is take that attribute and then apply it to other areas of personality where it's not relevant. So beautiful people might be believed as more intelligent. Intelligent people, if they're very striking, might be believed to be more trustworthy. If you have one standout metric, it often affects completely unrelated metrics. Now you think about advertising, and this is what makes likability and humour so powerful. If you come across as funny, all your other metrics you want to improve, like trustworthiness, premiumness, they'll go up as well. Okay. And the crucial thing about humour is it's something you can do in an ad. You can't really be trustworthy in an ad, but you can tell a joke. And what I think more advertisers should do is focus on communicating the things that are easy to do in an ad, where you can actually do them like humour, rather than the trickier things like trust or premiumness, and take a slightly more oblique route. If you focus on things like humour that you can prove, then all those other metrics will follow.
And the very good news is that AI isn't funny.
Hey!
And it never will be, because it's going to give you something obvious. So it'll never be irreverent, it'll never be complicated, it'll never make you stop in your tracks and think. It'll always just give you the most obvious one. So, by the way, you should try this with your AI. Ask your AI, upload your LinkedIn profile to AI and to whatever platform you use, and ask it to write you an irreverent bio. You'll need to keep giving it the prompt about 3 or 4 times before you get the good stuff, but it's usually pretty good. Then ask it to roast you in a comedy sense. And actually, it's not bad. So it's learning all of the time, but it's mimicking us. It doesn't have any empathy, you know. So it's learning to be funny. It will probably get funnier as it learns what the nuances are. But what's funny in America might not be funny in Ireland, you know. So we have to move forward. But again, as it moves forward and as it changes and as it gets to understand us more, we need to be more and more cautious about actually how we're being manipulated by it.
Okay. It has been so fascinating to hear from you all this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, and please give it up for our wonderful guest this morning.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you.